The Liebherr LTC 1045 is a smaller taxi crane, but even so it's got a maximum capacity of 45 tonnes. It comes in a smaller Liebherr branded box which doesn't have any information about the real crane. The packaging consists of a sleeve which encloses 2 expanded polystyrene trays. And with the sleeve removed, we can then open up the top and see all the parts tightly packed inside. The main part is the crane model itself, but there are a few other parts in the box. One is the lattice fly jib, which can be used to extend the reach of the crane. And there's also a part which contains storage boxes and lights, and that clips on the front of the carrier. To top things off, there's a small Liebherr flag that you can hang from the hook. All that's left in the box is a couple of bags, and these have parts that need to be fitted to the model. There are no assembly instructions, but we'll start by adding the outrigger pads. And these are very nice parts because they're steel parts with threaded ends. And that means when you screw them in, there's no screw threads visible, and they look like realistic pistons. You can screw them up for transport, but they do stick out a little bit widthwise. At the front of the carrier there is the storage box holder, and that just clips into the front. It's not really a tight fit, so it is easily dislodged if you pick up the model. There are some mirrors to fit, and these are plastic items, and there's one array that fits onto the front of the storage box holder. It's a tight fit, but that's probably a good thing, stops it dropping out easily. The next mirror is a conventional one that fits onto the cab, and there are holes in the grab rails for the mirror to fit into. The last mirror is a little bit trickier to work out. In fact, it just clips onto the front edge of the body where there's a little upstand for it, and it just presses into place. Okay, the next thing to do is to pose the boom in a travelling configuration, and to do that you raise the boom and the boom stand, and then just lower the boom so it clips onto the stand. With that done, we can then make use of the very unusual feature on this crane, which is that the operating cab is on a telescopic boom of its own, and it extends right forward to become the driving cab for when the crane's on the road. The next thing to do is to mount the fly jib on its brackets, which clip onto the side of the boom. These are only small plastic parts, and they are actually easily knocked out, so you need to be a little bit careful to keep your eye on them. Once they're in place, you can offer up the fly jib to sit on the brackets, and this is a little bit fiddly trying to get the right position. But the thing to do is to basically line up the connection points both on the jib and on the boom, because if they're lined up, you've got it in the right place. Every crane needs a hook, so we'll take some thread off the winch drum, and Conrad provide a piece of tape which gives you a start. And with that you take the thread down to the front, and then for this purpose we'll just put the single line hook on the end. It's best to tie the hook up with at least a couple of knots to stop it unravelling while you've got a load on the end. And then you can wind in any spare thread and then neatly trim off any loose end. For travelling we need to attach the hook onto something, and on this model there's no defined hooking on point, so you have to make use of the next best thing, and that is to make use of the boom support. It is possible to roughly attach the hook over the bottom of the boom support, although if you've got a piece of chain or even a little bit of thread, that would be better. Once that's done, the basic assembly of the model is complete and it's ready for the road. Looking underneath, the transmission is partially modelled to 2 of the axles, but the real crane has all 3 axles driven. The plastic wheels are quite detailed and they look convincing with the big rubber tyres. The storage box at the front is all metal and nicely detailed, complete with a generic number plate. The cab construction is good with metal grab rails and a nice door handle insert. At the rear the curved body shape is nicely formed, there are painted lights and a usable towing hitch. On top of the carrier body there are textured walking surfaces and cast-in ladders. The outrigger beams are metal with chevron graphics, and the smooth pistons look convincing. The toothed slewing ring under the crane is a nice detail, and the structure is modelled well. The main boom ram has a plastic jacket, but with a good colour match. There are some decent graphics on the boom, and in the boom head there are very nice metal pulleys. The fly jib is a very nice part, although the plastic connection point is slightly off colour. Metal pulleys are used in the fly jib, and 2 hooks are included, a single line metal hook, and a nice hook block with 3 metal pulleys. The LTC 1045 appeared at the Balmoral Exhibition 2013 in Eco Mode colours. Here you can see the loop for attaching the hook when it's in transport mode, and the Conrad model picks up the orange lights and wheel details quite accurately. But it's the elevating cab which sets this crane design apart from others. One thing the 1045 certainly does well is rolling along in a straight line. And if we look underneath the model, we see that the front axle has independent steering at quite a good angle, and the rear two axles have link steering, which is quite good. However, on the real crane, all axles steer independently, so it would have been better if it had been like that on the Model 2. With that said, steering just using the front axle works very well, but it's less successful with all axles steered because the middle wheel really wants to be straight. However, it is possible to replicate crab steering, and it's always fun to see that. Time now to set the crane up to do some lifting work, so the first thing to do is to pull out the outriggers. These extend quite smoothly, and then you can just screw down the pads. Because the outrigger beams are metal, they are strong, so it's possible to support the crane wheels free. It's time to put the boom up, so the first thing to do is to slacken off some of the hoist rope, and then the boom can be raised on its very stiff cylinder, and that allows fat fingers to get in and release the hook. The boom ram really is very stiff, but that's a good thing because it means it will hold any pose. Let's have a look at the cab, which is the unusual feature of the machine, and the functionality has been modelled very well. The cab boom telescopes out and can be raised to a realistic angle, and if the operator wants to make himself comfortable, the cab can be tilted back too. Or you can retract the cab boom in and just operate the crane from a conventional position. There's another very unusual feature on this model, which is that the cab windscreen can be opened. It works by using a hinge in the plastic, so it might not take much rough use, but it is a nice and unusual feature on a crane model. Rotating the crane is easy once you get past any initial stickiness, and because of the design of the real crane you have to operate the winch with your finger and thumbs, which works, but you wouldn't want to spend hours doing it. To extend a telescopic boom you just pull it out and it has the usual locking clip system, but the second boom section was a very stiff fit on the review model. The reach of the crane can be extended by adding on the fly jib, and the best way to attach it is to line up the lower connection points first, and then use the small plastic pins to secure it. The top part of the connection then folds over and clips into place. It's a little bit of a fiddly connection, but it does work, and you just have to be careful not to knock it out. To go for the maximum extension, you can swing out the solid part of the jib, and on the review model the paint thicknesses made it a little bit difficult to get the plastic pin in, so here a screwdriver is being used just to remove the paint from the inside of the connections. And if you do that, then getting in the pin is much easier. There are 2 connection points, so 2 pins should be used, but in practice one is certainly enough to hold the jib. All that's left now is to run the hook line over the end of the jib, and that really isn't too difficult unless you've had too much to drink, in which case it's a challenge. Not that any of the CranesEtcTV team tend to drink, because they just float in the top of the beer. There's a small guide pulley that just pulls out above the boom connection point, and you need to run the hoist rope over that. Once that's done, all the configuration is complete, and then you can extend the boom to go large, if that's what you like. Although by any means this isn't the biggest mobile crane, it still produces an impressive model when it's fully opened up. There are 6 sections in the telescope, and the fly jib adds quite a bit more. So if we get the tape measure out, we see that it's 39 inches or nearly a metre tall. There are other display options for the fly jib. Firstly, it can be configured at a number of different offset angles, and it's also possible to configure it with a hook at the end of the lattice section and not use the swing away part. There is yet another configuration option, which is to configure the fly jib as a short assembly jib, and to do that you remove the plastic bolts just above the offset mechanism. That allows the main lattice section to be removed, and then you can hang a hook off the short assembly jib, which makes an interesting display pose. In conclusion, this is a very good mobile crane model from Conrad. The main plus point is the functionality, because the features reproduce the workings of the real machine, and it's well made and detailed too. Overall, it's good enough to be considered an outstanding small crane model.